Our biggest story is the evaluation of the Big Local programme. During 2018, we have been exploring the Big Local resident-led approach and what change looks like on the ground. In this film, residents, Big Local workers, council members and officers, voluntary and community sector colleagues reflect and debate on the conditions for resident-led change and what is being achieved. So what is Big Local?
It's a bit like a spider's web, if you like. Ramsey Million, Ramsey Neighbourhood Trust in the middle, and round the edges are all the groups and all the clubs, and then in the next bit is all the projects. And we sort of sit in the centre, and people come to us and we go to them and we cross-refer and they join themselves up and then they meet somebody else and it's just like... Actually, it's more like a spider on LSD if you think about it. It's not tidy, but it works.
Yes. We do lots of things, but people might not know it's Big Local that does it. And does that matter? If you spoke to certain groups of people, they'd know what Crunch and Bosch were, because those are our youth clubs, but they don't know that they came from Big Local. They don't know that the Promoting Ramsey project came from Big Local. Is that important or is it not important? In Ramsey, as you know, we've got pages and pages of groups that are already established, so there's no point in setting up new groups. They're already there. It's the coordination and pulling together and getting them all to work together.
Don't you think really that a Big Local is a concept rather than just a little project? And what you're selling when you market Big Local is the principle that local people can actually be involved and decide what's happening. So that's why it's important to me to actually say this is a Big Local, but what's Big Local? It's about you making decisions, not us.
Residents described how they have developed structures to try and ensure accountability to residents across all Big Local areas.
The ideas come from local residents and the enthusiasm comes from local residents. But for us, our residents can be people who live there, work there, travel through that area. They might have relatives there, they might go to school there, they might attend our church or go to our pub.
Are you the chairman? Are you the vice chairman? They want that kind of full structured, committee meeting.
Why do you think that is?
I think that's partly, personally, my way. It's because it's, in some sense, it's the will that everybody knows. They don't know how to change it, and they're scared to change it.
We have a chair, we have a vice chair, etc. And I think the feeling was at the beginning of Big Local that somehow, there was a pressure for accountability, for us to be able to show what we were doing, that we were well organised. And that, in a sense, can take the fun out of it.
It was more informal, wasn't it? When it first started, it was far more informal. Yeah. And we weren't thinking about what's on the agenda and going through it in a formal fashion. And people could come on whatever level they were at and understand what's going on. We've just been talking about how complex it's become. The whole thing now has become very complex. We've got 3 workers now, we've got architects in, we're looking at a new building. We're working on a completely different level now, and new people coming in may not necessarily be able to grasp it or understand it or get involved. And we're asking them to come in on this very, very complex business meeting and get involved. And I think that's where we're falling down, but they can't.
Do we put that pressure on ourselves, I guess, or you put pressure on yourselves as much as anybody else?
I think it's because of the accountability, because we know that we've got to be accountable to where the money comes from, Big Local, and accountable to the community. Because when the community wants to say, you spend £600 on this, we've got to have a paper trail to say it was a committee decision, it was an agenda item, and this is what we all as the committee agreed. Well, just like when we decided to employ.
Because we've got people in our community who will come along and hold us to account.
Yeah, a lot of it is stemmed by fear of getting it wrong, fear of the accountability, the finger pointing.
We can drive people away by our intensity.
Yeah.
Really, it should be relaxed, it should be fun. Yes, there's a certain amount of tension and pressure brought about through the complexity that as we get deeper and deeper into different projects, but we should never let it get on top of us. We should say, okay, it's not my money. Some tend to think it is. It's not my money.
Residents then are all too aware how formal structures can be off-putting.
It was a real eye-opener at the seminar that you did with Kyle, in that the way that some of the big local areas were actually working, and felt that, you know, we had some that everything had to be agreed by the partnership, even the smallest decisions and small and it seemed to be an eye-opener to something that we let working groups do their own thing within certain set rules.
One of the chaps, Jeff, who got involved with manning sheds, he got involved with it because he thought it was a good idea and he was going to help to run it. But he also got involved in it because he could make things for himself, for other people, and he could sell those to raise money. That's not so important. It was him being involved for himself and him being involved for others, which I thought was great. But he did say, I'm not going to any meetings.
We made the comment on the third question there about to explain, if you want you to get to attract people, to explain to them what's going to be required, because I think you don't have to be involved with all of it, because all of it's a huge amount. You can, as you say, pick and choose and do what you can and walk away occasionally as well.
But it had been missold, getting people onto the partnership, you know, that they've been given the wrong impression, they hadn't been told, you know, and it is therefore having something that they're interested in. So we're cutting back more now to subgroups so that people who don't want that full commitment, but we ended up with people on who really, you know, didn't want to be there, and we've lost all those people now because they were told to come on and there was nothing there for them.
And it isn't all about the partnership.
Quite a lot of people think people are not involved if they're not on the partnership, and they're saying we can't get people on the partnership. That doesn't mean that your community is not involved in your decision making. So you may only have so many on your partnership, but as long as you are listening to the wider community and using those opportunities when you're getting lots of people together to continue doing your consultation, to continue listening, and they feel they've been listened to, so they know that those people on the partnership, oh yeah, they did this, they did that, they've listened to us, then I think you're doing something right.
Totally right, and we do quite well at getting people involved in different activities, but it's that formal involvement with the big local partnership they're not interested in, which I totally accept and quite welcome. I don't think you need to have them in that partnership, as long as, like you say, the community are involved in delivering the needs and services and projects that the community want. Then who cares if it's coming from the partnership? It's all the emphasis that I hear from local trust about how many people's in your partnership, how are you recruiting for your partnership. I don't care about the partnership. We've got enough to make those decisions.
So how we try to do it in our area is every 3 years we do a quite an intensive consultation and survey operation where we door knock every single household in the area. We go to different groups so that people can feed in. That's then written into a plan. That plan is then shared again with the residents through a workshop to see what the problems are and get the residents' ideals on how to solve those problems. And then we enable residents to deliver that work if they're up for that. With the bigger infrastructure programs we do, we take that information from the plan. If we haven't got the skills and knowledge in the area, we buy in a consultant with the skills and knowledge, but we also set up and encourage residents to come together in a steering group to lead that consultant, if that makes sense.
Is it fair to say the residents are in control?
Yeah.
How would the residents know they were in control, if they were? If they were, how would they know? If I said to any resident in Birchfield, do you think you're in control of what Big Local do? They'd just laugh.
Yeah.
So the people who make the decisions are the active residents in our area, and not the inactive ones. But the inactive ones can still have a say in it because we have meetings occasionally for the whole community. And when we have those meetings, we ask them what their vision is. So that what comes back to us is a vision for the whole community, and then the active residents make that into something solid. We've got 3 workers now, and they are going to, because they're answering the phone and they're on the front line, they're going to be making day-to-day decisions, but all the key decisions are taken by the partnership, and that has to stay that way. That can't change.
I've said what they say is being listened to, so they feel they're in control of the change. So whether it's through consultation, whether they're involved in developing projects, it's their ideas, their things that they're saying are being followed through, so they feel they have some control over that change.
The most cynical person I've met about, what's Big Local? Blooming neck, waste of time, this and that, and we had half an hour. And I said to you, Dave, you and I have got one thing in common. We've both got big gobs. And I said, why don't you come and use Big Local? And you are one of the one of the foundation stones of Big Local.
Absolutely.
Because you've got a big mouth, you go on and shout the odds about Big Local, you throw yourself into events, and that, to my mind, is what it's about. On the edge, feeling the water and coming in and becoming involved. And you are also spreading that by your example. And that, to me, is what resident-led is all about. Us working in there and showing that we can affect change. We can affect change. And I do sincerely believe that we are simply affecting change in our areas.
I think if you've got too strong a leader, that can lead to big problems. You know, you need to let everyone else have their say and have their opinions and not just go along with. So a very, very strong, charismatic leader, I'm sure it can work, but in our case, it didn't.
We all live together, we need to work together.
I think everybody's getting a little bit worn out. It's not worn out, but also I think once you start getting paid workers, the whole ethos changes. And Big Local now have 3 paid workers.
People will see the worker as a key person that they can, identify, go to, and it's up to the worker to make sure that everybody knows decisions and what you're, working on come from the residents. Yeah. That's what's so important, because they do see you as a figurehead.
Why did we take that decision residents only, and why has it proved such a good decision? And it wasn't just about keeping out people with an agenda, and people certainly within the council, as I know for a fact, I heard it, we're working out how do we get our hands on the money. I think you answered the question yourself. That's what prompted me to stick my hand up again when you said it's not just about who takes the decisions, it's who shapes the conversation. And we were very conscious that if we invited on not just the councillors, but also the big voluntary sector players in the church and other people like that, they're people who are used to sitting around meeting tables, putting forward an argument, persuading other people towards their own position. And if we wanted to bring residents, Andrew and Diane had been involved in all sorts of things before, but perhaps the majority of the partnership, and it's still the case, it was the first time they'd ever been in that position. And if we'd been trying to bring people who now are fantastic members of Parliament, really challenging, really good scrutinisers, really good at thinking strategically and thinking laterally, but if right at the beginning we'd put them into a group which had, as I say, several councillors, Age UK, the volunteer centre, etc., the church, etc., etc., they would just have kept quiet. They thought, these people. Andrew and I went to a very early Big Local meeting in Birmingham where we were talking, I can't remember which area it was, we were talking to one area where someone actually said to us, we're in the majority, but we just sit there looking at this conversation taking place around us.
Some of the comments you've just made, that it's outside our control, well, it's outside your local council's control as well. You're talking about how we have certain drivers from central government that we cannot ignore, or they cut off the taps to us if we don't take certain actions. So we're having to do a lot of things that you don't necessarily like, but it's not us doing it. No. We're only the front line that's being forced to do this to you and your communities. And believe me, I sit on a lot of committees that discuss a lot of things in this town. I've said it before and I'll say it again in front of yourselves. You are so lucky to have this group that communicates with its communities so well and has a feel and is so embedded in its communities.
I think that's something we fundamentally built in very, very early doors to create an absolute, there will be change. This is not stagnant.
They either want to make a political advantage out of what they do, or they want to make a financial advantage out of what they do. Whereas we want to make a community advantage out of what we do.
They're too politically minded, and they only want things for themselves. They're not really bothered.
They have their own agenda.
They've got their own agenda. We do have meetings with councillors. Don't get me wrong. We don't dismiss them completely. If we need help or we need information, then we'll go to the councillor who's within that area and ask him questions and have a meeting with him. But we didn't want them to be sitting on the partnership board.
I find that really, really insulting, I do. I've lived in the Big Local area all my life. Right, I am not a political councillor, I'm an independent councillor. Right, I have always worked in Barrowcliff. I started from the Residents Association and worked my way through from there to be a councillor. Right, when this came about, it tried twice to survive and died because people from outside the area were trying to control it. Roy then grabbed hold of it and he told me, and he got the LTO to say, come on Bill, as a resident you can come on.
When we set up, we knew, because I'd worked for the council immediately before becoming the paid worker, and I knew some of the conversations that were taking place in the council about how do we get our hands on that £1 million. The decision wasn't no councillors, the decision was all resident. However, we do actually have a councillor on the community partnership. She was a member of the partnership before she stood for and was elected to the council. She lives in the area. She's proved fantastically helpful, as have a number of other councillors.
I just feel like we're one big happy family. Yes. Half of our partners are councillors. I'm a parish councillor. Parish councillors.
Oh, yeah.
2 are unitary councillors or county councillors, as we know. They are very useful. They are all except one. They are all residents. And at the start of every meeting, the chair reminds them that they are there to represent the 3 parishes, not their own parish. And we haven't had any conflict.
I feel really for the first time in years that the town council are working with us and we're working with the town council. Because for a long time, and I'm sure a lot of people will agree with me, people that have lived in Ramsey for years, the town council seemed to be a totally separate body that had nothing to do with the rest of Ramsey. And you didn't really get a lot of support. But now it's entirely different.
Because we are the big bad services, we did have quite a bit of discussion, didn't we, about the relationship between services and residents. And what the bit that I personally was dead interested in was your question was, what does it look like? What are the basic conditions for it to work? And how does it fit with other decision-making processes? And we reflected on quite a few times where services might have come in and seen the opportunity of Big Local in a group like this to help them to deliver something they want to do on the ground. Steve put this one well, didn't you? Like turning a goodwill and good ideas into a chore. So we come with what we think we want to do in a community and think, yay, these people are here, they're all energetic, they're connected to this community in really amazing ways. They can help us to run this holiday hunger programme, but we completely miss a trick because we haven't allowed that community to co-design that thing with us so it actually does the right thing for that community.
We're all evolving and we're getting into the second and third plan. We're all learning. Now, the outer partners can be people who don't live in the defined area, but are bringing expertise into the area. But a final vote has to be numerically residents who live in the area. It can't be overshadowed by the professional partners.
For all the differences across the big local areas, people are working together, and this is having a beneficial impact on their communities.
People have really started working together simply because of this. We all get together. We've got the Heritage and Tourism group, which I belong to, and instead of all trying to do things separately and overlapping, we're all getting together so we can help one another, and it's made quite a difference. There's a feeling of positivity about Ramsey now, and you can feel now when you're actually out in Ramsey, you can feel a sort of change to it. Yes, they're more likely to help. Rather than just give you a negative comment, it's really, what can I do to help you? Or I can do that. And it makes such a difference.
More trusted now than we were. There's a lot of uncertainty right at the start by existing organisations, councils, various representatives from, lots of different places. Didn't really know what we were about, and neither did we at the time. But I think that there's a lot more trust now, and we're working a lot closer with existing organisations.
I think when you put Big Local together, people know, oh, local, well, I like where I live, and let's make it better. And then once you've got them people, them like-minded people together, like Dave says, you've got a catalyst, you've got collective action, and all that energy pushed into one room around one table where you can see what's happening.
New projects have been spawned out of Big Local that are now running independently and will hopefully be there long after Big Local.
That was never there before, or was lost, and we've revived them.
The million has actually improved the community relations in the whole of the town, and I don't really think you can put a value on that. It's something that I think was missing for a long, long time, because a lot of the bigger shops closed down, and the whole town seemed to fall apart there in many ways. But now with the money that's coming through and the money that we're putting into the individual groups, it seems to be coming back together again.
All the work is done by volunteers, but it still requires hard cash to work.
Ramsey, it's feeling like a totally different town now. Instead of, just, random people wandering about, you see families out and the activities that they're putting on for all the, the residents, it's amazing. And you see the toddler group and the Bosch play schemes and that, and, it's everywhere and people, it's great. It is because before there was nothing.